It's Jon Sjoberg, and I'm with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. I'm the regional fisheries supervisor, supervising biologist, yeah. Well, we'd fully renovated this facility for trout production. It was originally built in the early 1970s. In the early 2000s, finishing in 2006, it was completely renovated at a cost of about over $10 million. Shortly after mussels were discovered in Lake Mead in early 2007, we found them here at the hatchery. In the cooling tower that comes into the hatchery, the aeration tower, also in some of the larger pipes. And at that point, we realized that the water supply that we had was infested with mussel veligers as well as other life stages. And we also had a full load of trout here at the hatchery, a full production. We had to get rid of those fish because of the potential of transporting mussels from the facility. Those fish could not be put anywhere but Lake Mead and Lake Mohave. So we spent the spring of 2007 stocking all of the trout here in the facility into Lake Mead and Lake Mohave, and then shut the facility down completely and did a thorough cleaning. Well, in addition to the trout production, we also have a native fish facility here that's used for conservation of native fishes. And at that time, we had razorback suckers, which are endangered native fish to the Colorado River Basin, on station. Those were in a separate native fish room, and we were able to isolate that because it has a separate water supply and a separate drainage system. So we were able to isolate that and keep that going while we removed all the trout and cleaned and disinfected the rest of the facility. This facility was designed to plug a big hole in our statewide trout production for sport fishing. The design capacity was about 200,000 pounds of catchable rainbow trout a year, which equates to 400,000 to 600,000 fish, and that represented a third to almost a half of our planned statewide production for sport angling. So taking this facility off the table was a very significant impact, and we just have not had any way to replace that. One of the things we were really excited about when we rebuilt the hatchery was that we were able to, with some help from National Park Service, fund a very nice visitors center that takes up most of the upper floor of the hatchery with state-of-the-art displays, with really good information on both sport fish and native fish for the Colorado River system. It had aquaria where we could put either sport fish or native fish for display for the public. And one of the unfortunate design features that we discovered in that facility was that the fire sprinkler system is plumbed into our raw water supply. As a result of that, we were never able to open the facility to the public because there were concerns that quagga mussels would clog the fire sprinklers. So we were never able to get a permit to open that facility to the general public. The hatchery is supplied directly from Lake Mead. We don't have our own intake. We use basic industries water system. It's one of the original and oldest water supply systems out of Lake Mead. As a consequence, it's relatively shallow, and it tends to it's particularly good at picking up mussel veligers, and they have absolutely no treatment whatsoever on that system. So there's a number of issues there, and it's one of the reasons why we have such a severe problem here with quaggas, is because of the design of our intake system. We've looked into options to modify that or replace it, primarily by hooking into Southern Nevada Water Authority's more up-to-date system that does at least provide some pre-treatment. Unfortunately, we're looking at $3 to $5 million to make those modifications, and in this economic climate, we simply don't have the money, and we're not sure when we will, to make those modifications so we can go back into trout production. We're not, like most western states, like most states in the country, we're not in a position now in this economy to go to the legislature or the governor or anyone else and look for more funding. It's been a real challenge. We've been able to get by reducing stocking numbers here and there. We've been using the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services hatchery at Willow Beach to provide some production that we can stock in Lake Mead and Lake Mohave. And we've been able to take fish from northern Nevada, our hatcheries up there, truck them down here and use them to keep some stocking going in Lake Mead and Lake Mohave of trout in the wintertime, but at about half the numbers that we normally would stock. We're in a situation now where we no longer will be stocking trout after this winter in Lake Mead and Lake Mohave because the cost is simply too great to move those fish 450 miles one way for stocking and have that concurrent impact on the rest of our programs with our limited production capabilities. So we will no longer be stocking trout in the Colorado River system until we can resolve the issues here with the hatchery. Well, Lake Mead and Lake Mohave are really the only two major fisheries in the state of Nevada that are entirely within and connected to the Colorado River and areas that are known to be infested with dracinid mussels, with quagga mussels. We have been routinely sampling and testing other waters in the state since 2007, and we have not found any other areas that have quagga mussel infestations. The concern is that we don't have an effective way to move fish, transport fish in water from an infected hatchery in quantity to release to these other waters. And we certainly don't want to be in a position where we may be spreading quagga mussel infestations to interior waters in the state of Nevada. So it's really constrained us. What limited production we do have down here, and that's primarily from Willow Beach Hatchery on Lake Mohave, can only be planted in Lake Mead and Lake Mohave so that we don't end up in a situation where we're making the situation worse by infesting waters with mussels that don't have them. Even the urban fishing ponds in Las Vegas Valley have only been stocked with fish from northern Nevada hatcheries that are clean of mussels because those waters are not directly connected to Lake Mead or Lake Mohave. The impact or potential impact of quagga mussels on the sport fishery has been kind of interesting and kind of a mixed result. One of the problems with reservoirs like Lake Mead is that there are so many other things going on at the same time that it's very difficult to pick one thing like quagga mussels and point to that as the cause of the problem. For example, at about the same time that quagga mussels showed up in Lake Mead, we had an unintentional introduction of gizzard shad, which came down the Colorado River from an illegal introduction upstream above Lake Powell. So while it's possible we could have seen an effect on the food chain because of, for example, mussel veligers, the stripers are also fat and happy from eating all the gizzard shad that we'd never be able to detect the difference. So it's very difficult in a big complex reservoir to pin something on a single effect. It's interesting though in Lake Mohave that about the same time that quagga mussels were first found in Lake Mohave, we've seen a disruption in the recruitment of striped bass, in that we've got a couple of years of a big gap in early age class striped bass in the fishery. And that's not unusual to see it briefly, but it's flattened out at a very low level and it hasn't recovered like it normally does. And we're currently working with UNLV on some early life stage diet research to see if we can identify if quagga mussel veligers or early life stages might be a factor, if they're being consumed or nothing is being consumed by these age 1 or younger striped bass that are at that point in their life stage, they're really in kind of a planktonic feeding behavior. It's potentially an issue with mussels. We're looking into that now, but we haven't seen a similar effect on Lake Mead. One of the advantages we do have here at the hatchery, fortunately, is that we have the ability to limit the water supply to control where it goes so that if we do need to reoperate tanks or do certain things, we can at least minimize the number of areas that are infected with quagga mussels. That's allowed us to continue some of the work that we're doing here, for example, with endangered and rare native fishes. For example, we have a few small tanks here that we're using to rear endangered razorback suckers, and these fish actually are reared from wild larvae that we've caught from Lake Mead. We grow them up to a size of around 125 to 150 millimeters, at which point they can then go to ponds outside the hatchery to finish growing out until they're large enough to be released into the wild. So what we have on station now are 2 years worth of juvenile razorback suckers, and these again will be held for about 1.5 years total for each lot, and then they'll go out to ponds outside the hatchery facility where we can grow them up to 300 to 500 millimeters, and at which point they're liable to survive in the wild and we can release them for part of the recovery program. Again, one of the things we're able to do here, because we can subdivide and isolate the water supply, is do quite a bit of work for the conservation of rare species and at least get some use out of the facility until we can resolve some of the other problems. And in this case, we're working with the conservation program for the relic leopard frog. And the relic leopard frog, it's a native amphibian species that only occurs in wild populations in a few areas on Lake Mead and Lake Mohave right now. And so we're working with the National Park Service on what we call a Head Start program. In the early spring, we go out and collect egg masses from the wild populations and bring them into labs and then rear them up to either tadpoles or young frogs, at which point we can take them out and release them into the wild. And it gives them a much higher survival than just the survival of egg masses that are out there in a spring and are subject to lots of predation and other problems. So we just started this project here a few months ago, and we've got a couple of hundred, I believe, relic leopard frog tadpoles, and they will be going out probably in a few months to some sites, either in what we call the Gold Butte area around Lake Mead or to a site in Arizona that's east of Lake Mohave.